Well, I know King's Cross in Sydney. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So yeah, I've been a couple of times. Really, really nice place, lovely part of the world. So you're pretty new to chess, then, eh?
Took a long hiatus, and this
Uh-huh.
is the first time I've tried taking it, uh, you know, more proper. So
Yeah. So you posted this post in the for beginners chat the other, I guess it was a few
several
days
weeks.
ago, wasn't it? Yeah,
Hmm.
saying that you were kind of getting depressed about it, and that
Yes.
it was just getting you down,
Yeah.
banging your head against the wall, kind of thing.
I was taking all my blunders quite personally,
Yeah.
and I was focusing more on my shortcomings than on any gains that I was making.
Right. So focusing on the negative. I mean, it's a good way to learn, because I think one of the first things to understand about chess, and I think it at most levels, that it's actually games tend to be lost more than won. You
Hmm.
know, but especially so, the lower down the rankings you go. I think
Hmm.
it's. I've heard it described once that someone said that the winner in a chess game is the guy who makes the penultimate mistake.
Right.
It's almost like we're all constantly kind of making mistakes, but who makes the worst one, and give it away, kind of thing.
Right.
So what I thought we could just start by doing is just looking at one or two of your previous games. Uh,
Sure.
I'll share my screen.
Hmm.
Um, okay, so there we go. I'll get rid of the stuff we don't need. Yeah, so you've lost some beard recently, eh?
I have, yes. Yeah. Haircut, shave, finally.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so, I mean, where would be a good place to start? If you got a game that you thought maybe I should have won that, or
Um, so I typically analyze games where I think I did well.
mm-hmm.
It's so I can emulate doing well as opposed to because as a non-member of the website, I only get, one analysis a day. So I'm trying to use it to
Got it right? Yeah,
to learn what's good as opposed to focus on what's bad.
yeah. And look, I mean, you've
So
gone up 42 points in Rapid in the last 30 days, so you're making some progress.
yeah, definitely making some progress, but as you can see, I'm starting to stagnate there. But I haven't been playing many games as of late.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay.
you can see it's like 6 games there on August 30th, a few games on the 29th, but then it was only
And
yesterday that I'd played another game since.
you had a week off, and your opponent just threw that one by the look in 8 moves.
Yeah, yeah, I saw, I don't know if you know, but Gotham Chess.
No.
Okay, so he's a YouTuber and a Twitch streamer, and he
Hmm.
has a way that you analyze the puzzles. And something just looked off, and I took the moment, I analyzed the puzzle his way, and I found a mate. So,
Oh, fantastic,
hmm.
fantastic. So yeah, let's one. I mean, something like this. I think if you click on the left hand side of it, you actually go to the game itself rather than analysis. So this
Okay.
ended up. This is a stalemate, right?
It was. I obviously blundered.
Yeah, I've mate, I've done that myself so many times, especially when the game's almost won and you almost like pre-move and then um, just don't take the time. So I mean, I don't know if you've seen any of my videos on Chess Bootcamp, but I've got some really, really basic rules. So for
Okay.
getting people beyond that 1,000 mark, and the number one, which you're doing absolutely right, is you're playing rapid. Don't you
Yep.
should not play blitz, not play bullet chess particularly, until you can play at that kind of speed, but still do all the things that you're meant to be doing, right? So, what have you got to do? You've got to look at the whole board. You've got to know what's undefended on your side and your opponent's side, right? You've got to consider I mean, ideally, every possible move, which is a bit, you know, crazy, and you're going to filter some out very quickly. But if you're not doing that, if you don't know what's undefended, you can also use this thing called like SWOT analysis, which in business, it just stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So any strategic situation, you can look at, okay, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our opportunities? And what are the threats, which is your opponent's opportunities, yeah? So, so slowing down is number one thing, and it seems like you're doing that, and you're also spotting some points here. You know, I can see where you've taken a minute, 45 seconds, stuff like that for your move. So that's really something to look out for when you're doing your analysis, or even just going back through a game and analyzing yourself to say, you know, if there's a move that was a poor move, did you rush it out? So
Right.
here you've got a move that took 0.1 seconds. So maybe that's a pre-move, we'll see. So let's just dive in and check out what you're doing. So D4 opening, your opponent plays A6, which is odd.
Yep.
Chess.com's calling this St. George defense. Okay, and you're bringing your bishop out, that's valid. So, I mean, what I'm looking for in the first few moves is sorry, that's my dog knocking my laptop on the floor. First few moves is you probably want to be moving 2 pawns, not too many, right? Because you need to move 2 pawns in order to get both your bishops out into the board, right? It's not a bishop move, right? Because obviously your bishops are trapped in. Your knights can get out without moving a pawn, and your rooks don't need to get out until later, okay? But in order to develop all your pieces, you're probably going to have to move a couple of pawns. So then your opponent plays, again, very, very quiet, very, very slow. Okay, you've developed a knight. So what you've done here is you've moved 2 queenside minor pieces, which is the slightly slower way. If you want to follow the principle of getting your king to safety earlier on, and then you want to castle, you know, fairly quickly, which is all part of the opening. So you probably know, develop your minor pieces into the board, get your king castled, and that's kind of the end of the opening phase, and then you move into the middle game phase. Okay, so your opponent has actually done nothing so far to free his bishops up. His bishops are still here, completely trapped in. Okay, you've got 2 minor pieces out into the board, which is great. Now he brings a minor piece out. So you have to say, okay, what's it attacking? What's he doing? It's certainly attacking D4, which is currently defended by the queen. Not a problem. You've also got knight F3, which would defend it a second time, so allowing your queen to move. Okay, and you play E3, and that's okay. That's valid. It's adding a second defender to that pawn, and because your dark squared bishop has come out already, it's not closing off that square for your dark squared bishop. So that's cool. All pretty solid so far. E6, so he's moved another pawn and only moved it 1 square. Bishop D3, good move, classic move. But it is looking a little bit at some fresh air a bit down here, because that pawn's moved now. But it's moving into the board. It's controlling more squares that weren't controlled before. Yes, the knight's looking at that one, but this and this and this are now under your control. So that's limiting your opponent's options. Okay, now he plays G5, which I would say is probably a poor move. I mean, he's not able to trap your bishop at this point in time. Your bishop can move back to G3. It could even move there and attack the attack the rook, which would probably prompt this knight to capture it, and then you'd end up with double pawns on here. But that's not too bad. You've got ideas then. If this pawn You know, so if bishop goes there, knight takes, and this pawn takes, and this pawn's disappeared. You've then got options of maybe move your queen out the way and castle queenside and use that semi-open file for your own purposes, but this looks cool. Oh, and you do go for that. You go for the bishop attack. So at this point, I'm expecting knight takes, yes. Pawn takes, okay. This is not a bad situation. If you look at the board now, you've got 2 minor pieces developed. Your opponent has now swapped off his only developed minor piece. So your opponent's very behind in development. His king side, well, he'd be a fool to try and castle that side anyway. So he's going to have to try and castle queenside, I would say. But it looks like he doesn't castle at all in this game. Oh, he does. Oh, he castles kingside, does he? Wow. Yeah. Well, let's see how it goes on. Okay, so he develops the bishop, attacking this undefended pawn. Right, what options have you got to defend that pawn?
I'm trying to resist actually reading the notation and remembering what I did. But the options that I have would be to bring the knight up, so f3.
Knight to f3, yeah.
Yeah. Alternatively, I could move the f pawn up, but that'll directly come under attack, and then the pawn would retake if there was a pawn take, and
that would undouble these e pawns.
It would, and then I still have the queenside option. And unless I'm missing something, I believe those are my only 2 defenses of the pawn.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. I mean, the only other options there that you can consider is, do you have a check or a counter attack that would actually distract your opponent and prevent him really from taking that pawn and make it a bad idea. So in the end, you go for the knight option, which I think we've just seen is maybe the weaker of the 2. But it does stop the capture. Now he makes another rash pawn move. This is something I look out for a lot, is players making far too many pawn moves and making moving their edge pawns too early as well. You really want to keep, wherever you're going to castle, you want to keep these pawns that are in front of your king there as long as you can, unless you've got a really, really good reason to move them. So, yeah, too many pawn moves at this point. You castle, this is good. All right, I'm happy at this point. It's looking like you're playing a much, much better game than your opponent is. Now he's bringing this bishop to the b7 square. Obviously, he's looking at your knight, and what you don't want is bishop takes knight, and then the only way to recapture is with your pawn that's directly in front of your king. Now, right now, your queen is also defending a knight, so that's okay. It's not a big threat, but if you see that, then that's something that you really want to keep in mind. So, okay, he made that move quite quickly. You take 44 seconds and you block the attack, which is a good idea. Okay, so now he's got maybe bishop takes, but then bishop recaptures, and then you've got your bishop is now looking at his rook on a8. So,
while also opening up the queen file, which I believe is what my intention was.
Yep, and that's what happens. You've got, oops, so you've got a really nice attack now. He's got a problem there. He's got a major piece being threatened. You've got your queen on the semi-open d-file. There's no castling option now on this side. So it's all looking good for you. C7, okay, blocks the attack. Now, the thing that I would notice here is you've only got 1 bishop on the board, which is a light squared bishop. And he's got 6 pawns on light squares, okay? So what that's effectively doing is it's blocking off this whole area of the board here from your bishop. You know, it literally can't get to any of those squares on that side of the board. So when that happens, you might be wanting to think, okay, can I improve my bishop? Okay, so what this is basically doing is kind of weakening your bishop a little bit. But it's still got this nice diagonal here, so it's not an unhappy bishop. It's doing okay. So what's next? B4. Can you remember the thinking behind this one?
If I'm being honest, pawn game is one of my weakest elements. I was probably just trying to force my opponent to make a move for me to react to. So I would have had no idea. I'm just using my turn.
Okay, so you're just having a stab. You're just poking your opponent a little bit. And sometimes it is time to make a holding move, or just, you know, a nothing move. There are times to do that. I'm just not sure about b4. Let's consider some other ideas that you could do. This knight here is kind of limited. He can't go here. He can't go here. He can't go there. If your knight is going to be part of an attack, it needs to be, you know, up on the fourth or fifth rank, ideally. You know, somewhere up here is where he wants to end up. You've got this advanced pawn here that's possibly under threat from the bishop. So one thing I'd be thinking about now is maybe the risk of g4, kicking the knight away, and then bishop takes. So that might be something you want to think about. So one idea could be like, how can you add another defender to that pawn? Queen d4 is a possibility, and then maybe think about back up your queen with one of your rooks, with the idea of, you know, really punishing the fact that your opponent hasn't castled at this point. So, you know, if you're thinking strengths and weaknesses, you've got a strength that you're castled, he's got a weakness that he hasn't. So that's like an imbalance in the game. And so what you want to be doing is making the most out of your opponent's problems and try and make them worse, while at the same time, you know, minimizing your own risks and your own problems. So he's not castled. So what could we be thinking about, maybe to take advantage of that, to exacerbate it and make him look bad? So you've got, I mean, queen d6 would stop him from castling completely, but that would probably be met by the bishop coming back there, kicking the queen back away. What else we got? Queen d4, maybe there as well. You know, so because this bishop's a little bit limited at the moment. But I think, yeah, for me at this point, I might be thinking about trying to maybe move my knight up the board, but I want to make this bishop better. So I'm thinking that could be a lovely place for the bishop to go, because this pawn, this G pawn, is already advanced, right? So if your bishop can go get to here, it's like an outpost, which means that no pawn can threaten it. It's there. It would be pinning the F pawn against the king if it could get to there. Yeah, so that's not bad. So let's see how we progress. Okay, so you play b4. He brings his knight to e7, which means he can now finally castle his king, but he's weakened on that king side by the fact that he's moved both of these pawns. Okay, rook to b1 is an idea. I mean, what this lets you do is maybe rook b3 and then bring it over to here. I don't know if that's a plan. You thought for 45 seconds over that move, so I'd imagine you're thinking along those lines. Or also remembering this pawn is still pinned. So, you know, I think a lot with chess is that what you're doing is you're layering up these different factors in the game, you know. So, you know, what's a pin, what's a potential threat, what's a discovery, and as you progress, it's just like you just add more layers to that thing. So you're thinking, okay, when I move a bishop to this position, potentially there may be at some point in the future the opportunity to, you know, have a discovered attack or whatever. Okay, so now he castles. Okay, now you're sacking a knight.
Yeah.
Which I understand. You know, he's got no pawn now in front of his king. If this pawn captures, it's going to be fairly vulnerable. You've got queen g4, so he does take it. You bring the queen out here to h5. Okay, I see the plan. You're threatening queen h7 checkmate.
Mm-hmm.
And what can he do about that? I think he's got knight g6 prevents it, and then you could take with the bishop. Oops, take the bishop, and pawn takes maybe. Okay, that's now. You might have missed something here, which is you have the option of en passant. Yeah. So you could have taken.
I see it now.
That pawn. Yeah. And then what can black do to protect that king? The king can't move currently. Then you've got queen coming in. King would have to move to f7. Yeah, he'd be in a world of hurt. So let's just check the timing on that move. 11 seconds. Yeah. So you know the en passant rule.
I do. It would have just slipped my mind at the time.
Yeah. It's just, it's so much of it is about just remembering to take the time. So that's why I say you want to consider every possible move on the board, you know. And that was one that slip your mind. It happens all the time. You've got queen takes g5 now, but of course, the bishop is under threat, and it's so common. This thing where you think, okay, the pawns come out. Oh no, my bishop is under threat, and so you go straight from that thought to, I've got to move my bishop because my bishop's under threat. And what that does is it then blinkers you to other options that you may have had. So we'll see. You're using your time pretty well, by which I mean you're actually using it, right? But yeah, so obviously would have been great to have caught that, because your opponent would have been in a world of hurt. Pawn comes out. This is a great opportunity for you to get rid of an undefended pawn there right now. If he takes, so if you take now, queen takes, then you've got threats of the rook coming across, and then this bishop coming in and grabbing a pawn, which is a free capture because it would come with a discovered attack on the queen. So you take, great, queen takes. Okay, so you move your queen back to g5, pinning the bishop.
I took on g5.
Oh yeah, of course you did. Yeah, of course you did. Yeah. So you took his undefended pawn. So at this point in time, I'm thinking, when I look at the board, what is the story of the board right now? His pawns are in a mess. You've got this one kind of weaker pawn, because that was kind of a nothing move, like we said.
Mm-hmm.
His pawns are all quite advanced, and these two, you know, they're in the middle of the board. It's not strong. It's not a strong position. However, oops, it happens a lot now. Where were we? It was queen takes.
Yeah. Yes, 18.
Move 18. Okay, right. There we go. Yeah. So he's got his pawns on light squares, and he's got a dark squared bishop, and that's a strength for him, because it means that his bishop can move between all these pawns. Although, since you've captured on there, his bishop can't move at all because he's pinned. you're in a nice, your king is nicely tucked away in the corner there. So I'm happy about this position. You've got an open file on the D file that you can maybe think about exploiting as well. Yeah, he didn't need to make that move. If I was in his position, I'd be also eyeing up the D file. I think whoever can own this file at this point in time would be cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, and that's a good move. It does leave B4 undefended. Okay, so that's haunt you a little bit, which your opponent spots and he captures. Okay, you move back to kick the queen away. Maybe you don't need to do it. Ooh, hello. Okay, so he moves there. And that's off. Now, yeah. So if you capture, he has to capture back with the f-pawn, right? And what that would give him is an isolated e-pawn and an isolated pawn there on g4. So I think that would severely weaken his position if you accepted the exchange. And you think now for 51 seconds on your next move, and you decline the exchange. Now, if he captures and you recapture with the pawn, then you've got doubled pawns again on the f-file. He does capture, you recapture, right? So I think you would have been better actually initiating the exchange in that situation. So what you want to think about is a habit of like, okay, I've got options here. Let's say I take, he takes, okay, and then kind of snapshot the board. What does that look like? My king's still safe. He's got these now isolated pawns. Okay, that's snapshot A. Snapshot B snapshot B is I move here and then allow him to initiate the exchange. And then I've got these doubled pawns and a semi-open file. Yeah, so swings and roundabouts, you just need to consider those options. But I think this is probably the inferior one as far as you're concerned. Knight comes in attacking the pawn. G3 is not a bad idea at this point because remember his bishop is a dark squared bishop. So, sometimes you want to think about leaving all your pawns on your opponent's bishop if he's only got one left. Sometimes you want to put them on the opposite color. It all depends on the context of the game. Okay, rook b4 is defending the pawn. Gets kicked away. d4 is available, that's fine. Now he can now get rid of you if he plays rook d8 and force, he has to force exchange because you don't have any squares left on that fourth rank here. Okay, and he does it that way. That makes sense. Okay, you come here. So now that pawn is undefended. But he does more pawn moves. Ooh, another sack. No, it's not really. Okay, so five seconds over that move. So if pawn recaptures, you can then grab the knight. So I think is your thinking. But knight takes there. Okay, yeah, your bishop's still under attack, so you move that. He moves a pawn forward. Now, what's the situation here? The first thing I look for is what's undefended, and those two pawns are undefended. That bishop's not pinned anymore. So it's kind of equal. Material is kind of equal. Because you sacked that knight, was it earlier, or bishop earlier? So he's actually a couple of pawns up. Right, you kick the knight. He ignores the threat. Okay, so this is a kind of a pattern. So you've attacked his piece and he's responded by attacking one of yours. Now, if you could do something like, if you do rook takes rook, he's really got to recapture, and then you can go ahead and take the knight. Okay, so I think that was kind of poor. Or, okay, now he's got knight takes bishop, which he didn't see. Okay, so he didn't spot that. He took 5 seconds. He didn't consider all his options here. A better move is maybe knight take bishop and then rook takes knight. That would leave him in probably a stronger position towards the end of the game, because he'd then have a bishop and you wouldn't. But he misses that. Then you do rook takes, knight takes. Brilliant. Okay. So now you've regained the minor piece that you were behind. And let's look at the situation of pawns is not pretty for you because they're all isolated. Right? You haven't got a pair of pawns that can defend each other at this point in time. He's got 4 pawns, so you're actually a pawn up on the board, but these isolated pawns are an issue. So something I would maybe be thinking about at this point is get rid of that isolated f pawn and just swap it off there. So it's not a brilliant situation. Another option you've got, of course, is just f5. And when you get a bishop and a pawn like this towards an endgame, then they're both safe if you can do that.
Right. Well, it is his turn.
Yes, you're quite right. So, okay, so he captures. Right. You are correct. Okay. Rook to b5. So can he just advance there? If he does, then you've got bishop takes at c4. Okay. Another option here would have been bishop there to f7, because that would have still had the threat of capturing on c4. You move it there, which is defending c2. He advances. You offer a3, which he declines. Okay, attack the rook. Throws in a cheeky check, but it's not a dangerous one. He pushes the pawn. If I was him at this point, I'd probably accept that and try and create problems for you, but takes. You can take back, which you do. He attacks you. Yeah, there's a free pawn here. Another option that you have as well is rook to b8, which would have pinned the bishop. But then, your job is to get rid of these pawns really at the moment. So that's all good. You're now 2 pawns up. He moves his bishop there where it's defending the pawn. You throw in a check. He pins his own bishop. Oh yeah, and blunders it. Absolutely. So how long did he take over that move? 12 seconds. He thought about that and didn't consider the blunder. Okay, king's coming in. This is all good. Okay, so he's now starting to do the right thing, which is because his king is now one of the most powerful pieces. The king's actually more powerful than a rook. Okay, so what I'd be thinking about at this point is putting the bishop on maybe one of these squares so this is taken care of. And then all your king and your rook have to do is think about these 2 pawns and getting one of them up there. The other nice thing to bear in mind would be to see if you can try and force an exchange of rooks. Because if you can do that, you've done enough to get over the line and win the game. You throw in a check here. I think a lot of beginners throw in checks where it doesn't serve a kind of strategic purpose, right? But he moves his king to there. So when I see this, the one thing I see is king and rook on the same file, okay, on the same row. So you might be thinking about ideas like that. Come round and skewer the king, so the king has to move, you win the rook, win the game. Bishop comes over to the other side of the board. Like I say, I think these two squares would have been very solid for that bishop. Yeah, there's a check. Okay. Your bishop can now check if it needs to, or you can grab c3. Okay, but f3 comes with check. King moves again. You can still grab c3. You move h4. So you need to think about this rook now coming behind your h-pawn.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good in between move. So you didn't have to defend the bishop at that point. But you still could have taken, I mean, you can't take c3 now because the rook's moved. The pawn is defended, the bishop's attacked. Nice move. King moves across, it can't capture that pawn. Your bishop is now defended. Okay, and now you're lining up a discovered attack. Possibly, that could be really good. And now you could do this. Now you could do rook g8, okay? Comes with check, because the bishop's there, and then next move, you grab the rook. So what do you do? Okay, so you do the discovered check, but it doesn't come with the threat of capturing your rook. Yeah. And now you're pushing ahead with your h-pawn. I like the aggression. It's good to see. Another check. Now this, yeah, okay. King moves back, bishop comes in to defend the pawn. You've now got bishop g6. Yep. A check. So it's a potential threat here of obviously rook to d2 check, which would win that pawn, because the pawn could be defended by that bishop, but the rook's currently in the way. So let's see. Okay, you carry on with your threat. Yeah, king has to move. I probably have been inclined to move my king up in towards the middle of the board at this point in the game. Yeah, it's just a good general principle. Now look, you've got the exact same opportunity, okay, or a different version of it. You could come here with check, but then he's got king g3, so he could take again. But you know, if you can get that rook off the board, your h pawn has a free run. Okay, so okay, there's the check, and you do it. Brilliant. Okay, there we go. Exactly. So this game is now completely won.
Should have been.
Yeah. And now your only job is to think, don't stalemate, don't stalemate, don't stalemate. Okay. But we know the ending of the game, I think. Yeah, this is great. You're using your pieces to, you know, in partnership. It's fantastic. That comes with check. Lovely. Can't stop the second queen. Okay, so now the way that I think now is, okay, what squares are unavailable to my opponent, okay? And it's these, right? All of these he can't move to. So this is actually a stalemate position when you did that, okay? Now, when he moves his king there, he's moving his king now into the only square it has, okay? Yes. Now, so let's see what can you do with this? Basically, if you just keep checking at this point, there can't be a stalemate, okay? But you go there, again, it's the same situation.
Yes.
Right, you know, all of these squares are unavailable, and yeah, that's the thing. But you know, so I mean, I feel really encouraged about this game. You know, you've shown kind of pins and skewers and discovered attacks, and you know your tactics in chess. You know, in terms of mistakes, there's very, I mean, obviously other than the stalemate at the very end. So yeah, I think that's the move I would have done. Just keep checking. force the king towards a corner, and then
Yep.
just do pairing your queens like that. They can't be taken, So yeah, it was a blunder. But you played much better chess than your opponent in this game, so I feel really encouraged by this. You're taking a good amount of time when you need to. So it's slightly hard for me at this point to think what you've done wrong, or really the area to improve. And it's probably comes down to those absolute basics, which is taking your time and not throwing it away. But players at higher levels, I've done it in the last couple of weeks. I've had this exact kind of winning position with 2 queens and ended up in a stalemate because I just didn't take the time to do it. So yeah. So where do you think your weaknesses are at the moment?
Yeah, so something I've noticed is I tend to play better when my opponent plays, central pawns in the opening.
Mm-hmm.
So if we went back to the very beginning of the game.
Sorry, say again?
So if we went to the very beginning of the game,
mm-hmm.
we'll see that my opponent played irregular moves at the beginning.
Yeah.
And when I'm faced against opponents who play, Sicilian and Dutch and the likes, I really have no idea what to do because I haven't really prepared for anything. So with my opening, I was going for a London, and when I pulled my knight out instead of advancing another pawn,
mm-hmm.
It was that I had time. He wasn't occupying any space. He wasn't getting anything out. So I thought, well, if I move the knight up, that allows me to control, more squares that the e pawn wouldn't control, and I always have option for the e pawn later. If I was to play this game again, and I was presented with pawn moves like this from an opponent with the black pieces, I would definitely just move my e pawn up. I'd take the whole center, but I guess I'm not very comfortable with playing against what I'm not expecting.
Yeah.
So I find myself playing more reactionary than I do with some kind of hardline plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's weird because he didn't even come near you at the start. He's several paces away. He's not challenging for the center at all. So you could very easily have come in with your standard London setup. So that's what you're playing usually at the moment? Is it as white?
Yeah, I either play a standard London or I play with the knight move to that C3 position.
Yeah.
As white.
It's what Simon Williams calls the Jabava London system.
Yes.
He's got a.
It was a chessable that I learnt it from.
Yeah. And that's really good. I used to play a lot of London, and one of the good things about it is that, oddly, you do get to do your setup pretty much the way that you want it a lot of the time. With all those moves, pretty much whatever your opponent plays, you very often get the same kind of situations going on. And there's no reason why you couldn't have just ploughed ahead with E3 at this point as well. But it's so. But like you say, I mean, sometimes you do play this knight C3 as well. Yep. So do you think that it just kind of freaked you out and unsettled you that he played random moves at the start?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I haven't, memorized positions or anything like that. I mean, I've been advised against it, but I'm more comfortable against what I expect. So this position was completely new to me. I'd never seen this before. This so-called St. George defense.
Yeah.
So my mind went into kind of an overdrive to the position where it just shut down and I just played what appeared to be right to me.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would probably have advised just carrying on with your plan, as long as your opponent allowed you to do it. You know, so control the center. You're doing that already with your first two moves. You know, yeah, and let your opponent let your opponent blunder. I think is one of the best things that you can just hold in your head when you're playing, you know, people especially rated under 1,000, you know, because they will blunder. Everyone blunders from time to time, and lower down the ratings, people blunder a lot more. So I think playing the London as white is brilliant, because it is one of those openings that you can learn it in pretty quickly. You get the same kind of patterns gauging quite a lot, but people played the London system at the very top level as well. Marcus Carlson plays it, you know. Have you ever played it as black as well? Have you ever played a reverse London?
Not intentionally, I don't believe.
Okay.
I may have got into positions where it was a London, but I've never gone into a position as black thinking I'm going to be playing the London.
I kind of like it, and I like to have that in my back pocket as well. You know, so if you're faced with, let's just go to okay, just flip the board so you're as black. So you can play, like, if your opponent starts with d4, you can play d5 and think, you know, he does that, and you can just start thinking about there. So you can still get into like a reversed London system at this point. Let's say brings out another knight, and you can just go, okay, build my pyramid, you know, and you can just carry on. And then all you have to remember is that you're looking at the board is mirrored.
Yes.
So one of the things I quite like in the London is at some point, knights are there, and then if this bishop comes out to here, it can drop back down, right, swap over with a queen, and then you've got the possibility of a queen attack, you know, surprise mate down there on by capturing the rook's pawn if your opponent castles that side. So I have had that a few times. But yeah, reverse London is a load of fun. So it's tough for me from the game that we looked at, which ended up in a draw, but that was, you know, you really threw that one. It's tough for me to see why you're under 1,000 rated right now, to be honest, because it seems like, you know the tools, you know your own mind, and maybe it is a case of confidence. And I think that confidence does have play a big part in chess. You don't want to be cocky, right? And you know, I've lost games against players rated 250 points lower, just because I thought, they're not going to come out with anything good. I can just think about my ideas, and then you forget about their ideas and forget about the threats, and they come up behind you and you get screwed.
Right.
So it's what I find helps is to try and kind of get to a level where you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be a bastard in this game. Right? That's the kind of thing. I'm going to be really mean to my opponent, and I'm going to be calculating, and I'm going to be just evil. Right? That's the kind of mode. So it's never think, oh, I've got this, because the number of times that it happens to me, you know, I think, oh, I've won this, and then you end up in like a stalemate situation or something. Right. So, you know, it is a matter of just keeping that kind of steely thing, because I think, you know, couple of errors. You missed the en passant, which could have won you the game. or at least put you in a very, very dominant position. And in the stalemate at the end, other than that, I think that b4 pawn move was weakening that you made towards the end, and
Yes.
you ended up losing that pawn, of course, and letting your opponent in. But you had it there. There was also one. Yeah, you had the opportunity to
The queen
move
check.
the rook, put the king in check with a discovered attack, and win his rook, which also would have won the game. But we miss things like chess. But yeah, I'm really encouraged. Yeah, so it's not easy to see how. Do you play many puzzles?
I do. I have missed a few days. I actually saved my puzzles for today in case you wanted to
All right.
watch me go through them. But yeah, I try to do them every day with maybe an exception, once a week where things come up and I get to my computer.
Cool. Yeah. So let me make you the host, and then you can share your screen, and we'll just look at a couple of puzzles. I was getting some lessons a little while ago from a national master, Dutch guy, and he was doing a lot of puzzles. I found it quite frustrating because I sometimes get annoyed at puzzles. Yeah. Puzzle Rush is pretty cool as well.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Can you see all of that all right?
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Wonderful. Oh, hasn't ticked over yet. I must have done it just after midnight. I'm terribly sorry.
Well, yeah.
Sorry?
Make me host again. I'll go on to my puzzles, and we can, because I'm okay. Let me share my screen. Oh, you need to make me host.
Yeah, I'm trying to see how to do that.
3 dots over my video, top right corner, maybe. Click the 3 dots thing and then make host.
Make host.
All right. Okay, so let's go on to just general puzzles. Yeah, rated. Okay. Wow, this is
going to be a little more advanced than
it might be, yeah. So I mean, we can both do this.
Sure.
So right now, okay, so what's the story of the board? First
so I can see that my opponent is threatening check with his rook, or their rook.
Yeah.
Which would be unstoppable at that position. So I would either start making some kind of defensive move now to either protect that pawn, such as the bishop to c8.
Okay, yeah.
Or I would think about attacking my opponent's king so that they wouldn't be able to follow through with their plan, such as moving the rook up to the first rank there. There's
now if you do that, okay, what options does your opponent have?
My opponent only could move the king to e2 by the looks of it.
Yep. Yeah, because all of these squares and these two are covered by the knight. And then what could you do if he plays king e2?
If he played king e2, then I would have some new checks. I could move knight to either g3 or c3 check.
Yep. So
I would also have the bishop check, the bishop moving to g4 check, and that looks like mate if I'm not mistaken.
I think he's got that.
No, he would, yes.
And you've actually got two options with the bishop there. You've got bishop b5 as well.
Trading the bishop for the rook if he wants it.
So yeah, if you play bishop b5, he can move his king still the other way. So it's. I think we're onto the right lines. I can't see the solution myself. I'm not very practiced at puzzles either. But this seems to be, so what we're looking for is these forcing moves, series of forcing moves. There's also a possibility of pawn g4 at some point. So let's think it through. Well, let's have a stab at that. Okay. So it likes the first move, so that means we're on the right path. Now, you've got four-ish checks here. You've got 2 with the bishop, you've got 2 with the knight that you spotted. Okay. Now, what would be great is if you could, do a check and maybe fork a rook and win a rook, because you are actually you're down an exchange in material. But is there a forced checkmate anywhere? So the king right now has 2 squares it can go to. The bishop can hit one of them. So yeah, I mean, I think one risk is if that bishop moves, you're going to be in a lot of trouble with these rooks. So maybe what we need to be looking for is forcing moves. So let's say if bishop there, king goes there. You've still got checks. So I've got a hunch that bishop there is the next move. No, it's not. Okay. You've got checks. Okay, so this square is covered right now. That square is covered. If you check with the knight, he can still move here or there. He's got options. Okay, what about, so we know it's not bishop b5. So if he goes there, let's try that one.
Yeah, okay. I was going to say, and then could we check with the rook? Because the knight's protected, and if we move the rook to c3, it's protected by the knight.
The rook to c3 is protected by the knight, and it is. So, mate, you've got a good chess mind going on there for sure. And I'd like to see you, smashing through that 1,000-point barrier. It's great that you're playing rapid. Great that you're doing the puzzles. It seems to me like you're doing so many things right. I can't quite identify right now what's holding you back, but I think let's do another week. See how you get on. See. Also, do you play? One major thing for me that I've noticed is if I'm tired or if I'm distracted, okay, then I'll stop sharing the screen. Yeah, if I'm tired or distracted, then one thing that can happen a lot is, I think I'll do a kind of a quick game, or I'll just do another one and try and get a few points, see if I can increase my rating. But if my head's not in it, I end up losing that game. And then if I start another one, I can end up. So I mean, I don't know if you're like me, but you can have some days where you can't lose and some days where you just can't win. And I think on the days when you can't win, don't play. That's one of my biggest learning points at this point in time, So I don't know. We'd have to go back and look through a few more of your games, but I think that's probably a good place to wrap now. I'm really encouraged. I think you should be breaking through 1,000 and going beyond, right now, because you seem to be your head's in the game, at least right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll keep it. I might keep a track on how you get on as well. But yeah, other than that, I hope this has been useful.
It's been wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, mate. So I'll get on. I know it's pretty late for you there, eh?
10:30, yeah.
Is it 10:30? That's not too bad. Okay.
I'll be up for a couple more hours.
It's gone really quiet now at your end. Can barely hear.
Oh, sorry. Is that better?
Slightly, but anyway.
I haven't changed anything. So yeah, I'll spend a couple of hours, probably play some Reverse London. So
yeah, all good. All right. Well, look, take care, and we'll hook up again. I'd love to track your progress. Have a good one.
thank you.
Cheers, mate. Bye.